Good evening, everyone. We are delighted to have you here and welcome to the third in the series of Building Emotional Resilience. I am really excited to have the beautiful and amazing Louize Carroll as my guest this evening. And we're going to go to be in for a real treat because we're going to explore the three principles of successful relationships. And really, when we say successful, I suppose we really mean healthy in terms of a relationship that is flourishing and thriving and joyful. So, with that in mind, you will know if you've worked with me before, you've been on these webinars, and you're all incredibly welcome. How I love to keep it really interactive. We've got the chat going, we've got the polls going. But before we start, I love to stop. So, before we start, we're going to do something I recommend that you do before anything really important. And that is simply to pause and to stop. So, no doubt you've had a busy day and it's taken you, organization to get here, to be on time, and fair play to you. This is fantastic. But what I want you to do is to bring your full self to the moment so that we can let go of the busyness of the day, everything that came before, and really everything that's going to come afterwards. So, we're giving 100% of our most precious commodity, and that is our attention. So without further ado, and Louise, I invite you as well, because it'll help you, it'll help me, and it'll help everybody here, is to simply just shut down the eyes for a moment. And we're going to take three very deep breaths. So breathing in as deeply as you can, in through your nose. And then you can exhale slowly through the mouth. And you're just releasing as you exhale. A sense of letting go, maybe feel the shoulders drop. We'll breathe in for 2 in your own time. Deep breath. And that slow, lovely exhale. And just imagine your mind being open now to learning, to listening, to engaging. And how by being here, you're actually helping everybody that you love. Let's breathe in for that third and final deep breath. Right into the top, and then that lovely slow exhale. And whenever you're ready, we'll just open up the eyes and there we go. So, what's amazing is that's just 3 deep breaths, but it really does ground us and it brings us into where we need to be, which is in the present moment. So, I really encourage you to, if you have a pen and paper, I definitely would recommend taking some notes because when we write things down, we're actually more likely to remember them and implement them. I would also really like to invite you to ask questions. You can see at the bottom there, the chat on the side is fantastic. But at the bottom, you can ask questions, and I'm going to get to them at the end. So if you're particularly interested in one question, you can upvote it, which is a great little tool in terms of knowing which questions are most resonant or most, interesting to the general audience here this evening. And also, just to let you know, I am running a competition for €100 voucher on Instagram. So basically, all you need to do is take a snap of the screen and share it. And it's a €100 voucher for a brand new online course. And I'm very excited. I'm going to be launching in a couple of months' time. It'll be coming out in, I think in April is our date. So it's a brand new course and you can enter in to win that prize. So, without further ado, I just want to, before I really properly introduce Louise, who many of you may know or not already, but Louise is a consultant psychologist and is also a bass player in the Blizzards, which is a wonderful band with Niall Breslin and other wonderful people, I'm sure, too, that I don't know the names of. You can tell us, Louise.
The name, I'm
Yes.
sorry, Jack Murphy and Justin Ryan.
Lovely. Okay. And there's a brand
named.
new album or a single coming out, isn't that right? On Friday.
Yes, I incidentally
Yeah.
have a single coming out in 2 days on Friday called Trigger Me.
Trigger
So
Me, which is
I'll
very
weave
pertinent.
this into our discussion today. Yeah.
We will indeed. And Louise, you also have Prism Therapy, which is an
Mhm.
online therapy resource for people, which is incredible. And that was just set up a couple of months ago as well. Am I right? Or a little bit longer, maybe a few months?
Yes, we went live in November, but we've been planning it for a year, and it's an online therapy platform in response to, and again, this was a little bit to do, well, a lot to do with the pandemic, but I would have gotten a request pretty daily. Could I recommend a therapist?
Hmm.
And obviously my own client base gets filled up, and then
Hmm.
there's waiting lists for the people that I actually can recommend. And it was genuinely once or twice a day I would get a request to be able to
Yes.
recommend a therapist. So the idea was, why don't I put together a platform with a bunch of therapists that I could
Hmm.
personally recommend, because
Hmm.
we interviewed them, spent time with them,
Hmm.
and have a certain standard of qualification and training as well that we offer through the platform. So when I get asked now, I can say any one of the therapists on
That's
Prism. That
fantastic.
was the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's such a necessary resource, and it's
yeah.
wonderful that it's there. So congratulations, and
Thank
it's
you.
brilliant to have
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
So before we really get into the three principles that we want to share this evening, I'd love to just sort of talk more, I suppose, about what is emotional resilience. And I usually
Mhm.
like to start just with one little insight, and then I'd love to hear from you, Louise, how you view emotional resilience. And then
Mhm.
also in the chats, please do let us know as well what is emotional resilience to you, and we'll read some of those comments because I'd love to hear. So, in terms of the topic for this evening, relationships, for me, I suppose I would say that, to be honest, like, I probably started doing some serious work on myself about 12 years ago, in terms of really reflecting and really trying to deal with past difficulties, my childhood, all of the work that is required really in terms of going through
Mhm.
therapy. And what I would say is that that work and that time has been the greatest investment in terms of my relationships. And I've really noticed how my relationships have changed significantly
Mhm.
from doing that work on myself.
Mhm.
Which is something that in the past I might have been one of those people who would have fallen privy to the sort of justification, I'm right and they're wrong, sort of,
Mhm.
and I have every reason to be annoyed, and that sort of more kind
Mhm.
of very unhealthy victimhood, really, that I can see my clients fall into, that I can
Mhm.
see, that I can certainly relate to.
Mhm.
And I just feel that that resilience, that work, that deep inner work is such a gift to everyone. And that's why I'm really so enthused about this evening in terms of when we take the time to be here. Everyone who's shown up here this evening, you're doing it, it appears for you, but essentially it goes far beyond that. And I think, my son at the time, I'm saying this is 12 years ago, he's 14 now. So, he was 2 years of age. And I just look back and I just think to myself, thank God. Thank God I did
Mhm.
that work, because
Mhm.
as a role as a parent, it's so crucial to be able to be in the best sort of emotional health and fitness that one
Mhm.
can be. And
Mhm.
again, it goes beyond oneself. And so I suppose that to
Mhm.
me is at the heart of it. And how interdependent we are, how relationships are, how we learn about ourselves, that we're not, I think it's Jared Manley Hopkins, no man is an island. And that is, you know just such an area for growth within ourselves.
Mhm.
So what do you think, Louise? What is emotional resilience to you, or what does that word or that term even mean to you?
It's thanks for sharing that. Actually, that was good insight into your own journey, and I think it's likely a journey that a lot of people would identify with. I certainly
Mhm.
do as well, and
Mhm.
I think the victimhood thing is quite an interesting thing, because, and I like to kind of refer to it as, because there are legitimate people can be legitimately victimized, right? And that's something that can happen. But then there's victim consciousness,
Mhm.
and that's the problem. And if we get stuck there, and we get stuck there because we stay there, and
Mhm.
if we stay there, then this victim consciousness becomes an armor around us through which nothing can ever penetrate, including relationships, including connection, including love, including vulnerability, including
Mhm.
taking risks, courage, bravery, all of those things. It can actually, whilst it might protect us, that armor, it keeps everything good out as well. So that's the problem with getting stuck there. So
Mhm.
doing that work that you just described it's everything, but it's
Mhm.
so difficult, it's so hard. Well, you know, and usually, and I don't know what it was for you, but usually there is a turning point, there is a transformational moment in your life that makes you think, I have to take the reins here, I have to get a
Yeah,
hold of this, I have
it's
to get
so
a hold of this.
true. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you I
yeah,
think you're spot on. There is that moment where it and it's usually when things go really bad, so that it becomes that sense, this is not sustainable, I can't continue.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think you're right. And those moments can be etched into our minds as, they're very dark moments and hard moments,
Hmm.
but they are pivotal in the sense that they are
Yeah.
transformative. So it is
Yes.
that idea of, flourishing under fire, and how sometimes you have to go to those really dark places to come out the
I
other
believe
end.
that you do. I believe that you
Yeah,
do. I do.
yeah, yeah.
You know, we'll get into that a little bit more later, I'm sure, in detail. But in terms of emotional resilience,
Hmm.
I always, it's changed for me over the years what it meant to me and what it became, personally and professionally. And I think it's useful sometimes to think of what's the opposite. What's the opposite to emotional resilience? You know, is it emotional resistance more likely, right? Because resilience tends to refer to flexibility. That's
Yeah.
what it refers to. It's the bounce back ability is a word.
Mm.
It's the rubber. It's the, you don't get flattened by something. You know, you morph, you shape, you move, you come back, you
Hmm.
flow, you bend. That's
Yes.
actually what it is. But
Yeah.
resistance is rigidity. No, it's also reactivity, particularly in the context of emotions. It's reactivity and
Mm.
it's getting derailed.
Hmm.
So emotional resistance is getting derailed, it's being reactive, and it's being really rigid. And
Mm.
if you think about it, also just separate them out. So emotions, what are emotions, right? You can't not have emotions. Emotions, if you're human, if you're breathing, you're going to have emotions, right?
Hmm.
The first
Hmm.
thing I hear, pretty much without fail, with
Hmm.
new clients when they come into my clinic or virtual clinic is, I want to stop feeling the way I feel. I don't want to feel like this anymore.
Hmm.
You know, it's absolutely legitimate, and everybody will understand that statement, and everybody will be able to identify with, I don't want to feel this pain, I don't want
Hmm.
to feel this anger, I don't want to be angry anymore, I don't want to
Yeah.
fight anymore, I don't want to feel this way anymore, I don't want to be sad anymore, I don't want to grieve anymore.
Mhm.
But the wish to not have emotions is a folly, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
if we persist in our lifetime trying to get rid of the emotion, we actually perpetuate it. Because once we start to avoid the emotion, push it down, ignore it, pretend it's not there, bury it down, suppress, repress, once we do that, once we engage in any kind of avoidance
Mhm.
tactic with an emotion, we've just doubled it. We've just made
Yeah.
it worse.
I couldn't agree
Because then,
more. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
You're
And
spot
then it
on.
becomes about the emotion, about the emotion.
Yes, yes, yeah, absolutely. Like being ashamed of being ashamed, for
Right.
example, or
Mhm.
fearing fear, and yeah,
I'm
um,
anxious about my anxiety. I have guilt about my guilt.
yeah,
And then we're
exactly.
fighting this. I actually call them the clean emotions. The pure emotions are the emotions because of what happened.
Hmm.
They're the pure emotions. They're the ones
Mm.
that will heal you actually if you stay with them. But the dirty emotions are the ones that when we push this down, we push it away. So
Mm.
we might get really angry in our lives with other people, but actually what is really going on is that we're really sad. We're
Hmm.
really upset. We're really disappointed with that person. But
Yeah.
now we have anger because that helps us feel better, right? Anger does, right? Because it makes you feel big and boisterous and resilient and push back.
Mm.
And you can't take advantage of me. You can't undermine me. So anger
Mhm.
rises up quite often as a cover for the pure emotion of
Yeah.
sadness, or disappointment,
Or
or shame.
injustice. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So
So
essentially
that's
what
the
you're saying
emotion.
is acceptance, isn't that right? In a sense, like, when you talk about resilience, and,
Yeah,
the opposite being rigidity, is like a
right,
resistance in a sense, isn't it? Yeah,
right,
yeah,
exactly. So you've got
yeah.
these emotions, and emotions are within you, right? So that's
Hmm.
separate. That's within you. Now the resilience part. The
Hmm.
resilience is what you choose to do with those emotions. How do you choose to respond? So rather than being reactive, like emotional rigidity, we have,
Hmm.
or resistance, we have emotional resilience, which is flexibility. So we
Yeah.
feel these emotions, we feel this intensity, and Lord knows they're
Takes
intense, right?
courage. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, but
Mm,
we don't get sucked in like a
mm,
vortex. We don't feel those emotions and just think the world is ending. And there's
hmm.
lots of reasons why we feel that way, and we'll get into that too.
Yeah.
But the resilience part is feeling what you feel, not getting sucked in, watching it from half an inch away, I like to say,
Mm. That's a nice
and
expression.
choosing what to do next, choosing to do what matters to you despite the storm that's going on within you. And we have that choice. But it's a skill. It's a
It is
skill. We're
such
not,
a skill, yeah. I always
yeah,
think it's
we're
like
not
an
taught this.
acrobat. It's such a fine skill, and
Yeah,
you need
yeah.
to finely tune it. I'll just read
Yes.
some of these comments here, Louise, and see what people are saying. So, Joanne, emotional resilience is being able to deal calmly with daily stresses and traumas that may arise. Yeah, so that's that non-reactivity that you were talking
Hmm.
about.
Hmm.
Jer, you're so welcome. She says, when I think of emotional resilience, I think of that pause. Oh, this is a beautiful one, Jer. And the very famous
Hmm.
Viktor Frankl quote,
Hmm.
between
I love that
stimulus
quote.
and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. Jer,
Mhm.
that is amazing. And it's just he sums it up so beautifully. And I think
Mm.
that, because of what he was coming from and his experience, it just carries so much weight, because if he
Yeah.
can do that in the most adverse, awful
Mm.
circumstances a human being we can imagine could be in, and I've been to Auschwitz and just been there for, on a
Uh,
as a trip, you just can't argue with that. You can't dispute it. There's something so
mm.
profound about it. So thank
Mm.
you, Jer, for sharing that.
Mhm.
Um, let's see what else people are saying. Emotional resilience. Um, okay, trying to stay calm, having the tools in the toolkit, says Emma, to deal with everyday life situations. Yeah, absolutely. And
Mhm.
and sort of bringing those tools, like actually using them and acknowledging when you've used them, I think is really important, and giving yourself credit that you've
Yeah.
you've applied them.
Yeah. Does it take
Yeah,
time? And again, it is a skill and you can learn it. But if nobody's teaching it to you, you know, you're
yeah,
going about your day-to-day life and you're reacting. You're reacting because maybe that's what you did, right? And that's what you witnessed. That's what you watched growing up. And there was
yes,
certain set of circumstances. This is what you do. You react.
yeah,
And so we go into adulthood thinking that that was normal. That's normal behavior. And we don't actually think about that as being any kind of variable in why we might be encountering the same patterns in our relationships.
yes,
Um,
exactly,
yeah.
yeah. So getting on to that whole area of relationships, and I know people are like, what are these principles? Like, it's like, what's number one? So let's go with number one. Principle number one, Louise, what do you think, in your amazing opinion, what do you think is helpful for people?
Okay, so I think there's so many, by the way, but I do think trying to extract the core ones as number one, I would say trust fully, appreciate more, and argue better. I'm mushing them together. So
Okay,
trust
so
fully, appreciate
Kieran's
more,
just
and
written them
argue
there, which
better.
is great.
Hmm.
Trust fully.
Hmm.
Okay. Let's break it down. So if we go with that little bit first. So to
Hmm.
trust fully, what
Hmm.
what what does
Hmm.
that mean for you, or how do we go about that?
Trust is the utter foundation of a relationship. Uh, If you don't have trust, you can't have intimacy. If you don't have ultimate trust, you can't reach those dizzying heights of intimacy. It can't be done, right? Because you've one foot out of the game and you've one foot in, and you're watching round corners and you're thinking, hmm, is this right? Is this wrong? Is something going to happen? Is the rug going to be pulled from under me? And some of these feelings are very natural. They're very normal. But if we get hijacked by our feelings or our resistance to whether we should trust somebody or not, it makes us feel safe. It makes us feel like we're protecting ourselves, right? So this is the reason why we mistrust.
Mhm.
Also, we might mistrust because we've had a series of relationships where we've been let down in the past. So we've learned to mistrust. We've learned that this is the way we protect ourselves. We keep one foot out and we keep one foot in. But then we wonder why we can't reach that satisfying level of intimacy that we crave, right?
Mhm.
So we have this in our minds. Our mind is always going to chatter, right? Our feelings are always going to generate, and we're going to interpret that. We each come to a relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a work relationship, whether it's family, friends, each of us come with our own stories, our own full life stories. Each of us has been through hundreds, if not thousands, of events, of incidents, of
Mm,
love, of joy, of trauma, of disappointment, grief, loss, adventure, misadventure, joy. We all have that story, each of us. And that
mhm,
story lives within us. And then we come together and we see things through the lens of that story, each of
mhm,
us,
mhm,
meaning that we can both interpret the same event in very different ways,
mhm,
depending on what we've been through. And so a relationship is like a dance.
mhm,
It's like a
mhm.
dance. Somebody makes a move, the other person makes a move. Is it complementary? Is it not? When does it
Yeah.
clash? And how do you make sense of that clash?
So doesn't
Yeah.
that go back to, Louise, I suppose what I shared at the start in terms of like working through it and understanding those patterns within one's own childhood so that we're not just repeating them out again and again and wondering why. It's like Einstein
Yeah.
said, to do the same thing again is and expect a different result is a form
Hmm.
of insanity. So a
Yeah.
sense that we can do that within our relationships and bring all of that with us if it remains unconscious.
Well, absolutely. And it
Yeah.
usually does remain unconscious again until we hit a pretty big wall, or we keep hitting the same patterns over and over again to the point where we think, well, we realize we can't change other people. We realize we can't curate this to happen in another person, but yet it still keeps happening. So, what's the only thing that we have power over? Ourselves, usually. So,
Yes.
so yes, we're encountering the same patterns in these circumstances. And yes, we might have been let down. So
Hmm.
trust could be an issue for us in any relationship. But
Hmm.
here's the thing, we get to choose,
Yeah.
we get to choose. There's no guarantees in this life, none, not one. And
Hmm.
somebody who could be 100% trustworthy might let us down. They
Hmm.
might let us down.
Hmm.
But does that mean we stay one foot out and one foot in for the
Hmm.
duration of the relationship? Not
Hmm.
knowing what it could actually become, not knowing the potential of what it could blossom into because
Hmm.
we feel like we're keeping ourselves safe. So this is what I mean about trust. It's a choice.
So,
Even if
w-
you've been hurt. Yeah.
would you say that people give up a bit too easily then in some circumstances? Is that what you mean in terms of if they had maybe stayed the course a little bit longer in terms of being able to see, go through difficulties and come out the other side because they take that leap of faith in a sense and trust even though they have been let down. So a sense of being able to accept. It's back to that resilience, isn't it? It's back to
Mhm.
being flexible and saying, okay,
Mhm.
this person has made an error. They're human. They make
Mhm.
mistakes, and therefore I can somehow find it within myself to be able to move with that.
Yeah, but there are many variables to it, and it's not always that. uh, I wouldn't say always that it's giving up too easily as such, because it's such a
Mm,
fundamental mix of so many variables. What happened? What happened in the initial circumstance to cause that sort of mistrust?
mhm,
And what was the response, which is very important in any kind of dyad or dynamic. What was the response? Because if somebody goes, yeah, sorry, I messed up, sorry, sorry about that, okay, and you're thinking, Jesus Christ, my heart's just been ripped out of my body. Are you kidding? Is that it? And they
mhm,
think, oh yeah, no, no, yeah, no, you're right, yeah, no, I shouldn't have done that. That was terrible of me. And it's the next day, and you get on with it, and you bring it up
mm,
again, and they think, gee, really? Are you still talking about this? Can
mm.
you not get it? Really? You're still on this? Are we not past this? Right? It's because if that's the dynamic and
Yes.
that's the relationship, then there's something wrong. There's
Yeah.
something wrong with us.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
but if you're with somebody who takes full ownership for what happened, full responsibility,
Mm. Yeah,
right?
it's a good
And
point.
actually shows remorse for what happened,
Remorse. Yeah. Yeah.
and leaves space for you to explore your own pain, and
Mhm.
contains that with you,
Mhm.
that's a different scenario. And
It
all of
is.
these things influence whether you make a choice to
Mhm.
go all in and to trust.
Yeah. Colette says there, do you think that we create our own emotions? And I suppose, in a sense, what we're talking here about is yes, but it's not quite as straightforward as that, but you certainly have a choice in how you respond. And as a result, you will then be more able to create an emotion from your non-reactivity, as opposed to getting sucked up into old patterns, for example. I'm just going to read here some of the results of the polls that have come in so far, and then I'll release some more. So basically, we have 85% of people here this evening would like to feel more patient with loved ones. Okay, so that's good to know. Would sort of 96% would like to be more patient with themselves. Isn't that interesting? So there's a
Mm.
higher percentage here that want to be more patient. And
Mhm.
that's again really interesting in terms of how once you learn to be more patient with yourself, you are much more likely, I would say, to be patient with other people because you have that skill within yourself.
Mm.
Would you like to feel more secure in your relationships? This is an important thing. Like security and feeling safe is integral, and 93% are saying yes. That's
Mm.
really significant.
Mm.
Do you suffer from the disease to please others? And again, 83% are saying yes. Do you wonder if someone you love is a narcissist? And 32% are saying yes. Do you feel that living in lockdowns and COVID has had a positive impact on your close relationships? 62% say yes, which is good to hear, and 36% are saying no. So it did certainly put pressure on people. Do you feel uneasy with figures of authority in work? Because that's something I see. I'm sure you do as well, Louise, with people feeling uneasy with bosses and
Mhm.
in work situations. So 64% are saying yes. Do you struggle to set healthy boundaries in relationships? 75% are saying yes. Okay.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
I'm just going to release some more there to give us a little bit more because the more this is really all for you guys out there. And what we want to do is just get a good feel and an understanding of where you're at so that we keep tailoring it to help you. And that's what's wonderful about this kind of that we can actually get that information as we're chatting.
Mm.
Um Okay, so we've gone trustfully. Let's go to appreciate more. And I like the sound of that. That sounds good. I think
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it seems kind of like an obvious one, but actually, and again, I work with couples as well, and often what I would see is a lot of criticism, and it can go both ways,
Mm-hmm,
between both of the people. It's not always just in one direction, but
mm-hmm,
it's quite often it can be one direction, and then the other person can be quite quiet and silent. And there's another dance. It may not be a beautiful dance, but it's a dance nonetheless.
mm-hmm,
And if you criticize, right? And by the way, and as Esther Perel says, behind every criticism is a wish. If you
mm-hmm,
use criticism in order to express your dissatisfaction, what you're actually not saying is, rather than saying, you never take the bins out, right? Rather, actually, what you'd like to say is, honey, would you mind taking the bins out tonight? Because I do them a lot and it would just help free me up to do other things tonight. How would that land with you versus, I am sick of taking the bins out. You never take the bins out, right? So,
I'm laughing here to myself. I wouldn't take a bin out if you paid me. Is that not a man's job?
but that's a different
Surely.
topic, Fiona.
It's a joke. It's a joke. Well, it's not really
But
actually. Do
it's
you
it's
take out bins, Louise? Let's be honest
I
here now.
actually do.
Do you?
I carry
Oh
my
my.
own gear in the van. There's no
Oh,
gender
Louise, fair
divide
play to
here.
you.
Yeah.
Go, girl. You're like my sister's amazing like that. I'm like, oh, Karen, will you take out the bins? Anyway,
Yeah.
that's a
That's
different
great. And
topic.
yeah. But if we constantly criticize, right, and if we constantly point out, there's where you went wrong, you know, yes, okay, there was about five other lovely subtle things maybe that you did for me today, but there's the thing that you did wrong. There's the thing that I'm annoyed by. So I'm going to point that out. And so if you continuously do that with somebody, and look, we have a habit. We have a habit of taking the good things for granted because we think
Mm,
that's how people should behave. So we don't tend to comment on them. And then
mhm,
the thing that kind of annoys us, right, or ruffles our feathers a bit, we're down on it like a ton of bricks.
mm.
So this is actually a huge predictor of satisfying relationships. Are
Yes.
you appreciating your partner? How are you letting them know that? Are
Mm.
you telling them? Are you using your words or are you showing them? Because it can be multiple ways. It doesn't just have to be with words. And some people struggle with that, and that's okay. But you might have other ways of showing that you appreciate somebody,
Yeah, it's
and it
really
doesn't have to be
important.
huge. It's it differentiates everything,
It
right? It's
does.
because
It
if you
does.
yeah, I mean, a relationship is the essence of feeling connected, feeling important, feeling seen, right?
Hmm.
It's one of the greatest needs of every single individual is to feel seen. And I don't just mean I see you. I
Mm,
mean I see you for who you are. I
mhm,
see you for your vulnerabilities. I
mhm.
see you for all the things that you don't like about yourself, and I love and accept you for that. And I
Yeah,
don't need you to be any different. That's what being really seen is. That's what that means. And when we have somebody who appreciates us for those things and doesn't just point out where we went wrong, it builds us up, actually. It
of course
strengthens
it
us.
does. Yeah, it's like being acknowledged. It's I think it's called a Pygmalion effect. I mean, you've ever heard
Hmm.
that, where you see the
Hmm.
good, and that's actually it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a positive way. And
Yes.
it is really effective, you know.
Yes.
So I'm going to
Yeah.
take this opportunity, Kieran. Thank you for taking out the bins. I'm
There you
taking this
go.
moment to appreciate more. But you're so it is. It's like you know what it's like when someone does it for you. You know when
Yeah.
someone takes that moment and says, "Do
Hmm.
you know what? Thanks a million for making that favorite dinner," or what. All of these
Yeah.
little things that we do every day, the cup of tea, whatever it is. It's
Mm-hmm.
just it is. It really warms the heart, and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
cost anything, doesn't take anything. It's just again, it's a mindfulness, it's awareness,
Yes.
and making that choice to say, I'm going to actually put on the lens, if you like, a lens, like a new pair of glasses where I see what you do as opposed to what you don't do.
What you don't do. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
notice, and if you might think you do it, but it would be interesting, even just for our watchers, to think about what could you do differently. What
Mm,
could you how could you articulate it differently? Maybe it doesn't have to be a partner. It can be a friend. It could be a
mhm,
sibling or somebody at work. Notice what happens. Notice if there's any different. Notice how you feel,
mm,
actually, because
mm,
often it can feel good as well for you to express it to somebody else, to let somebody else know, I see you and I appreciate you for what you do. And
mm.
thank you for doing that. Thank you for thinking of me in those situations. It means a lot.
Yeah.
It's that sincerity from somebody else. This is what it's about, isn't it? These are the relationships that define how we
Mm.
experience life,
It's
and
very significant. Yeah,
mhm,
it really
mhm,
is. Okay, so appreciate more. That's very tangible, isn't it, for people to do? Like, you can
mhm,
even like anyone here this evening can just make that decision. Okay, I'm going to start to really do that from now on. I'm going to, make a point of it, if you like. And it
mhm,
needs to be quite um conscious in the beginning and pointed because you're not in the habit of doing it. Therefore, you need to be really mindful about it, I think, to start off with, and then it becomes
mhm,
more automatic and natural, like anything that we
yeah.
change.
Yeah, yeah. But we also start to see the other person through a different lens, because we start to see they don't have to do that. They don't have to. This is nobody has to do anything for us, right? And if
Yes, yeah.
particularly if you're in a longer term relationship, we start to take each other for granted, and
Mm,
there's the risk. And that
mm,
person does that, and I do that, and that's just the way it is. But actually, that person is making a choice to show up every single
mhm,
day in a relationship
mm,
with you. Equally,
yeah,
you're making a choice to show up every single day in a relationship with them.
yeah,
And it doesn't do any harm sometimes to remind ourselves of that, because
mm,
you could make a choice not to,
mhm. Yeah,
and
exactly.
it sort of renews and refreshes the reasons why you're here, the reasons why you're in it. Or
Mhm,
it could bring up the question, why are you in it?
mm,
It's not always a good thing, because when you do start reflecting, and this is sometimes why we don't reflect on these things, is when we do,
mm,
we might start to ask questions of, is this actually making me happy? Is this right? Do we
mm,
need to have some hard hitting conversations? But
mhm.
that's only a good thing too, ultimately, for
Yes.
satisfaction in the long term.
It goes back to what you were saying at the start as well, doesn't it? In terms of actually, rather than pushing down the emotion, like an emotion is a good thing, at that prime emotion, before it gets into,
Primal emotion, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. There's a lovely comment here from Miriam. She says, my daughter 10 made my bed a couple of times lately. I said to her how much I appreciate it, and she was chuffed. That's lovely, Miriam. It's only going to encourage more of the same. So well done. That's really, really nice.
Hmm.
Okay, so then we have to argue better. Um, that's an interesting one, and it's
Hmm.
almost like an oxymoron, isn't it? A paradox in a sense, to argue better, but it sounds fascinating.
That's it, right? Yes. People hear argument
Yeah.
and they think, "Oh no, negative. God, we're spinning out of control." It's so normal. It's so natural. And again,
Mhm.
remember, you've got two people's life stories coming together, right? It would be unusual if it didn't clash from time to time. It would be highly unusual. And
Mm,
actually, if I saw that in front of me in a therapy room, I would be
mm,
thinking, who's suppressing what here?
mm,
Who's not saying what they really think?
mm,
Who's who's being a people pleaser?
mm,
No, okay, maybe not every single time. Maybe it just so happens sometimes everybody is very aligned in that particular relationship,
mhm,
but usually somebody's not saying what they think, or
mm,
somebody hasn't quite crystallized what it is that they stand for or want in their lives, what they
mhm.
value, and so the other person sort of leads the way all of the time. Um,
Would you
yeah,
say that's predominantly in romantic relationships, or do you think that we need to argue better also with our families, for
yeah,
example, our mothers, our fathers, our siblings? Is that
yes,
something?
yes. So
Yeah.
here's where it plays into what we watched when we were little.
Mhm.
What happened? What happened when things went wrong? What happened when there was a rupture in the either the parent-child relationship, or even as a teenager? What happened? Did mom go quiet on you? Did she pull back? Did she emotionally withdraw?
Mhm.
Was silence used as punishment? Was it passive aggression? What did you witness growing up when there was a rupture in the relationship? Because that's what we learn. That teaches us something. That teaches us
Mhm.
how to behave when there's a rupture in a relationship. And we
Mhm.
take that into adulthood. So when
Mhm.
we move into our own relationships, it doesn't have to be romantic again. It can be in any scenario. And we feel threatened, or we feel something is undermining us, even though it mightn't be, right? Because remember, we're looking at it through a filter. And if we feel threatened by this situation, we're more like, we go into our limbic system, right, which is our emotion center of the brain, which goes 0.08 of a second faster than the prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking, our monitoring, our reasoning, our rational, our healthy judgment, right? But the
Mhm.
limbic system goes quicker when we move into it. That's why we feel things quickly and we're more likely to react. And that's why that
Mhm.
Viktor Frankl quote is so important. Because
Mhm.
when we
Mhm.
learn to regulate our nervous systems,
Mhm.
we can take it down. So we can deactivate our nervous systems. So we don't operate from our limbic system, we operate from our thought center. And
Mhm.
if we operate from here, then we're going to
Mhm.
say something that is far more in pursuit of what matters to us, rather
Mhm.
than feeling defensive, right? And feeling that we're reacting to somebody taking their love away, because ultimately that's what it's about, right?
Mhm.
Because if we feel threatened and panicked in a situation where somebody is either criticizing us or they've said something, let's break it down, right? Okay, you're angry in the moment and you think, how dare you? How rude. Look at all the things that you do or don't do.
Mhm.
There's defensiveness. But what's behind that is, oh my God, you've
Mhm.
criticized me. You've pointed out something that you're not happy with about me. What does that mean? Does
Mhm.
that mean you don't love me anymore? Does that mean I'm going to be abandoned now? Does that mean I'm going to be rejected by you? Right? And if we feel those feelings like we did as kids when these things would happen, that's why we have the exact same emotional reaction in our body. Our
Mhm.
nervous system activates in the exact same way as it did when we were 5 or we
Yeah.
were 12 or whatever it might be. And we get into this dance. Here's another dance, right? But this is a
Yeah.
stalemate dance. This is a stalemate dance because
Yeah.
this person behaves this way, our nervous systems react this way, and it keeps going round and round and round, perpetuates each other until one person breaks it.
Yeah, and it's almost like, I can remember that it's a spiral that once you're in, it's hard to get out of,
Mm-hmm.
because the limbic system is so activated at that point. Your nervous
Yeah,
system has gone
that's right.
too far, really. So it's really how integral awareness is, and
Yeah,
noticing those patterns and preempting those patterns and knowing your
yeah.
triggers. Back to the
That's it.
trigger me. Yeah.
That's it. But it feels, see, the problem with it though, and I've had this conversation a lot recently, is that it feels so true. So you're in the midst of an argument, or even you mightn't even be in an argument, but you're thinking about something your partner, your friend, or your boss said, and you're thinking,
Mm,
God, what do they mean by that? And then you think, God, I wonder, did they mean I'm not competent? Or did they actually mean that they didn't think I had the capacity to do that? Jesus Christ, I
mm,
can't believe they said that. And then, right, so now you're getting activated. Your
mhm,
heart's probably beating faster. Yeah, the blood is pumping around your body. Your temperature's going up. Meanwhile, our mind is going, Jesus, you're very activated. Something
mm.
must really be wrong. This is how this is the interaction that goes on,
Yes,
except it's
yeah.
in a split second.
It's so
So your
fast.
mind interprets this activation in your body like, you're right, there's a threat here.
Yes, exactly.
right?
So it's
It
justification then as
feels
soon.
so true. It
Yes,
feels so
yeah.
true. And this is what
Mhm,
keeps it going. So
mhm,
and I call this the short circuiting
mhm,
of that loop, the short circuiting of the anxiety loop, the stress loop, or the nervous system activation. How do we learn to short circuit that? And there's
mm,
lots more talk about mindfulness and meditation, and that is sure, that is absolutely one way that we can learn to to
mm.
deactivate our nervous systems so we can stay in the game. It's my new favorite phrase. How do you
Yes.
stay in the game?
Stay in the game,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, without
Hmm.
being reactive. Let's just read some more of these the polls coming in, because there's some questions there that we asked I think could be useful as well as we continue. So basically we're looking at the different types of relationships people might be sort of concerned with here this evening. So we look at the one with your relationship. Does your relationship with your partner, if you have one, because we're not making any assumptions, bring you mainly joy or tension? So 26% are saying joy, and a mix of both. So that's interesting. 65% is a mix of both, right?
Very natural.
Um
Hmm.
yeah, so I think it's easy to go with a mix of both, but I suppose the predominant one is what's quite interesting as well. So does your relationship with your mother bring you mainly joy, tension? So 35% are saying joy, 13% tension, and 51% again that mix of both. And I think that kind of highlights something really important, isn't it? It's like that our relationships do that. They there's nothing more joyful than feeling loved, connected, safe, appreciated, trusting. These are huge, amazing. It's part of what makes being human so incredible, and that joy that comes from relationships. But then the flip side is the pain that comes with them. So it's equal
Hmm.
measures of pain and difficulty um
That's right.
that our relationships bring. So
Yeah.
children, then we got the relationship brings 42% brings joy, 48 a mix of both. Okay. Does your relationship with your friends bring you mainly joy? 52%, and 45% are a mix of both. That's quite interesting. Again,
Mm.
colleagues, 35% are joy. Um, Only 11% are tension, and 53% a mix of both. And then the boss comes in with 24% of joy. So well done to whoever those bosses are. We need you, because that's fantastic to think that your boss brings you joy. Happy days. And let's see, 61% are saying a mix of both in terms of tension and joy. So only 14% are tension. That's quite good. And then your
Mm.
father would be 51% joy, 25% a mix of both. And siblings, 32% joy, 13% tension, and a mixture of both is 54. Do you feel that accepting yourself first of all and then accepting others would help your relationship? So 95% are saying yes. So I'm really glad to hear that in terms of that message is kind of landing, which is
Mhm.
really good. Um, okay, so let's move on to principle number 2. What is that? Are we all ready? We need a drum roll. Principle number 2 coming up.
This one can be a bit controversial because I think
Yes.
people hear it one way. So I'll say it and then we can get into it. But
Yeah.
so principle number 2 is recalibrate expectations. So when I
Okay.
say that, people hear, I don't think I should have to lower my expectations to be in a relationship, but it's not
Mhm,
that. It's not about lowering your expectations. It's about recalibrating it,
mhm,
right? So bearing in mind the story that we spoke about at the top of this call, which
mhm,
was you come to a relationship with an idea of who you are, an idea of what you want, and an idea of what this other person and who this other person is and how they will fit into that expectation.
mhm,
And that tends to be quite rigid. It
mhm,
tends to be quite rigid based on, well, I don't want this, I want that. I want them to be like this. And when I fall in love, it's going to be magical and they're going to meet my every need, maybe not my every need, but most of my needs, right? So they're
mhm.
going to be enthusiastic, they're going to be excited, they're going to be supportive, they're also going to give me security, connection, they're also going to
Very
help me
wealthy,
feel
hopefully.
brave. They might be
It's a
wealthy,
joke.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, financial security, right? So but
Yeah.
they might also
They
be
have to.
adventurous, but they might also keep me safe,
Mhm,
and we do ask for a lot from our relationships in the modern world. And
mhm,
then they're going to be somebody who listens to my every whim, you know, and listens to every time I'm upset, or they're going to listen to all the ways in which I feel the way I do on a daily basis. But then they're also going to be really, really strong, you know, and they're going to defend me, and they're going to be able to, you know,
That's
yeah,
exhausting listening to it, isn't it? That list, like it's sort of,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So what happens, right? What
Hmm.
happens? We get disappointed
Oh yeah,
because
quite
one
quickly.
or two of those things minimum don't happen. And
Because you're, yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
It's a
but
real
we've spent
person.
it's a real person, and we've spent a lifetime fabricating what this person was supposed to be.
Mhm,
A lifetime fabricating it. I think it's important to say that word, because we've created it from snippets of what we've seen, what we've
mhm,
witnessed, what we've
mhm,
heard, what we've
mhm,
watched in Hollywood,
mhm.
right? And
The
we think
Disney
we have it in front
princess
of us.
and yeah.
So yeah, the whole works.
Mhm.
And it might be a bit like that at times, especially in the dating, in the early phase, right? So you think, I'm onto
Mhm.
it. This is it
Mhm.
now.
Yeah,
Right?
I told you it was true.
Not at all. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then smack. Then it's just, what?
yeah.
What? That is not what's supposed to happen here. You know, you're
Mhm,
supposed to deeply comfort me when I'm upset. Where have you
mhm,
gone? Why have you gone
mhm,
out the door? Are you not even noticing that I'm upset? What? What's going on here? Right. So that's just
mhm,
one example, but there
mm,
can be multiple. And so the
yeah.
fairy tale starts to crumble. It
Mhm,
starts to break away.
mm,
And if you let the mind spiral, then it becomes potentially demonizing. Well, this person
mhm,
is actually a bit of a shit, right? Or
mhm,
this person is actually a narcissist, or this person is, I'm not saying it isn't in some cases, and we have quite a high percentage here who actually, and maybe we should actually touch on that. It's pretty
mhm,
significant at
mhm,
some point, but
mhm,
our mind spirals, right? So when our expectations get devastated and let down, which they will, right? Because we have such high expectations nowadays of what we want, because now it becomes about fulfilling our own identities in life with a
mhm,
partner, as opposed to, you know, meeting somebody to have a family, and which is kind of old school what it used to be. It was a sort of a service economy. It was like we find love, but we do it together, and we have a family, and we, you know, have a
mhm,
stable financial security together. Now it's like we meet so much later in life, right? And
mhm,
we decide perhaps to commit much later in life, and then we've higher expectations of, well, I'm committing because you're going to help me become the full version of who I want to be. So this is
mhm.
a whole new way of doing relationships, by the way, which
God.
again, expectations are up here. So it feels devastating when it doesn't work out. And then we start to potentially demonize the other person. No, it's
Mm,
all your fault. You're not giving me this, you're not giving me that. But in actual fact, what I mean by recalibrating expectations is, what are they doing? What is good for you here? What is
mhm,
working? What are the ways actually in which they show love? And we touched on this earlier, where
mhm.
we all have different ways of showing love. Maybe they don't use their words. Maybe
Yeah,
they show you. And can you appreciate that? And
exactly.
or is it a deal breaker? And it might be a deal breaker for you. And if it is,
Mhm.
that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
But it's about figuring out. Perhaps you're not, if you're so convinced about what love is, you might be missing it. You might not be
beautifully put.
actually feeling it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really well observed, and I think it, that sort of idea of pursuing this ideal romantic relationship, that is
Mhm.
sold, as you say, through
Mm,
movies, and
mm.
this sort of romanticism can last a lifetime. A person can spend their life feeling disappointed in
Yes.
what has the potential to be a really fulfilling, amazing, trusting, beautiful relationship,
Yeah.
but it's always tinged with this discontent in some way, that
Yes.
you're not buying me the flowers that
Yeah. That I tick the box to say that you love me with. You haven't done that, so therefore you mustn't love me. So now I'm gone into activated nervous system mode.
yes,
Now I
exactly.
think I'm being shafted. Now I
Yeah.
think there's something wrong. So now I'm going to defend against you. You're not going to know what's going on. I've
Mhm,
emotionally withdrawn. You're lost.
mhm.
Where's she gone? Right? I'm over
And it
here
creates
going, oh my God, I
tension,
got it
and
so wrong. Yeah.
so it's unfortunate and unnecessary, and that's the thing, isn't it? That I
Yeah.
think, and Esther Perel, who you mentioned earlier, she's really good at this in terms of breaking that down, isn't she? And just seeing
Yes.
clearly this person is not there just simply to serve
Meet
your
your
needs,
needs.
or
Right.
yes, exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I think
Mhm.
that's
They're not your
really,
parent. But,
yeah.
it's something actually most people go through to a certain point is, how do you let go of the expectation to have every single need met? Because if
Mm,
you were lucky enough to be born into a family where there were resources and there was enough love and there was enough stability to have your needs met,
mm,
that's a beautiful thing. But
mm,
it leads you astray into adulthood, thinking that the next person you meet is going to do the same thing, right? So there's a period of transition that we need to go through where we
mm.
realize, actually, they're not there to meet our every need. We don't get to make demands of another person. We don't
Yes.
get to do that,
Hmm.
but we do get to ask. We do
Mm,
get to request to have our needs met. We absolutely do. And we 100% have a right to do that. So if we feel our needs are not getting met in a way that we think is important, we can
mm.
ask. If our needs still don't get met, well, then we have information about the relationship.
And doesn't it come back to then knowing what your needs are, and
Mm.
having sort of, from want of a better word, realistic needs or compassionate needs, or needs that are mindful and
Mm.
are keeping in mind not just what you want, but how it
Yeah.
works within the relationship. And is that need actually, is it something the person can give you? Because
Yeah.
if you take this
Right.
and you put it out of context of just romantic relationships and our
Mm.
partners, and you look at maybe the needs that somebody might have towards a mother, or
Mhm.
a sibling, or any of our sort of nuclear family that we grew up in,
Mm.
again, you can see how
Right.
we need to really kind of look at our expectations there, and again, maybe question some of them and say, well, you know
Mhm.
is this helping the relationship, or is it putting pressure on it? Am I constantly being disappointed because
Mm.
my parent can't deliver this, and that's what I want from them? But maybe they just can't give
Mm.
it. And it's the
Yes,
ability to be able to accept and come to peace and term, a sense of
this
acceptance
is
with
it.
that.
100%, but no one person can actually meet everybody's needs.
Mm.
It's unnatural. As a
Yeah.
baby, sure, you're gonna get fed when you're hungry. You're gonna get changed when you need to. You're gonna
Hmm.
be put down to sleep when you need to get your sleep needs met. So, in that sense, you cry, somebody attends to you. So think of it like that. So your needs are getting repeatedly met. But
Hmm.
that's what stays with you. If I
Mm.
cry, my needs are going to get met, right? So, and as a child, you learn what gets your needs met. And by
Hmm.
the way, that can be adaptive or it can be maladaptive.
Hmm.
So if a toddler or a child is in an abusive family situation and they cry and scream when they're hungry or they want to be loved or to be hugged, and if
Mm.
they get a dig in the back of the ribs every time they do that, they're going to learn not to do that.
Hmm.
So that child will not scream and cry when it feels upset anymore. When he or she feels upset, that they'll learn not to do that. They take that
Mm.
to adulthood. So when they
Mm.
feel intense emotion, they're more
Mm.
likely to withdraw socially, emotionally, down, shut down.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
partner
Yeah.
doesn't know how to reach them and they don't know how to explain it without
Absolutely.
support, right? So
Yeah.
this is the manifestation of what we've been through in terms of how we
Mm.
interact with no matter who it is. Again, across the
Mm.
board in our workplace,
Hmm. Yes.
even
Yeah.
continuously with our families or friends or partners. It plays
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
And that's why I asked specifically about people's bosses, and because often there's a transference there in terms of how people relate to figures of authority, can often be back to maybe how they've related to their parents or teachers, etc.
That's
And
right.
they're bringing things through and they're not even
Mm.
aware of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's really helpful to notice those patterns, and then to feel more at ease and comfortable, for example, with a figure of authority. Um,
Yes.
Okay, we're doing great, and I'm definitely going to be doing a lovely little hypnotherapy at the end where I'm going to bring a lot of this together. I just love to kind of shape it as we're working through it. So let's move on to principle number 3, Louise.
Okay. So principle number 3 is radical accountability. Radical
Mm,
accountability.
okay.
So this is radical because
Mm,
it can, again, if you hear it or mishear it, it can sound like, why should I take full responsibility for everything here? It's not about that. But
mhm,
it is looking at how do we co-create the situation that we're in, no matter what it is. Now, it's not about pointing fingers, it's not about blame either at all. But it's
mhm,
about, how do I show up? How do I
mhm,
show up in any interaction I have? What do I
mhm,
bring? What am I bringing? Am I bringing a history of resentment? Am I bringing my mistrust? to the
Mhm.
table?
Mm.
Am I let me give you an example actually.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a couple. It was a couple that I worked with.
Mm.
And they came to me because they just, I mean, years, 20 years of just bickering, bickering, fighting, low
Mm.
frequency warfare. Loved each other, never split up, but
Mhm.
fighting all of the time. So they eventually came to therapy thinking, we can't go on this way. It just can't go on. They were both exhausted.
Mhm.
So the history was the guy had a history of alcoholism in the early part of their relationship. He was
Mhm.
quite angry, he was quite aggressive.
Mm.
Um, and the woman, well, she was quite obviously fearful at that time. So they went through quite a bit of trauma at the time.
Mhm.
A lot of emotional negativity that would have gone on. A lot of sort of emotional. They were very young when they got married as well, and like 19. So
Mm.
there was a huge amount of growing up that still had to be done, and maturity that still had to be done that wasn't done. And they
Mm.
had kids early, so there was lots of enmeshment, lots of codependency,
Mm.
lots of gaslighting, lots of not knowing how to cope, lots of
Mm.
alcohol. It was a mess, right? So that was their early years. So he mellowed out. So he's sitting in therapy thinking, I love her. I want her to be happy.
Mm.
I don't
Mm.
understand why she's not happy. She's so emotional and I don't know how to cope with it, but I'm here for whatever she needs. And this was very genuine.
Mm.
And as we broke it down, and she said, he's so aggressive. He's so aggressive. I can't talk to him. I can't say anything. He just gets so aggressive. And in actual fact, as it panned out, even as we watched in the therapy session, he would say something and she wouldn't use her words, but she would be incredibly dismissive. So she would, right?
Mhm.
Such subtle things, like,
Mm.
or right. So
Yeah.
just little subtle movements like that, right? And he wouldn't react initially, but the more she did it, then he would. Oh, look, what's the point? I can't do anything. And then she would go, see, right?
Mhm.
So,
Mm. Mm.
so this subtle movement of was she felt under the radar, not conscious,
Yes.
but
Probably
didn't see
so ingrained at that point. She didn't even know
so
she was
ingrained.
doing it. Yeah.
Didn't know she was doing it, but for him, it
Mm.
was a constant dismissal. It was a constant pushing
Mm.
back.
Yeah.
And of course, she was doing it because she had years of pain, right? So she was traumatized. She was
Mhm.
fully traumatized and she couldn't let it go. So now
Mm.
she was met with this new version of her husband who was loving and kind and caring. And she had an opportunity to hold power now.
Mhm.
And so once we brought that out into the open, I mean, it was very emotional for both of them actually. But
Mhm.
but she took accountability. There was her challenge. She had to take radical accountability and realize how she was now showing up. She was holding the power and she was wielding it in
Yes.
response to being a victim of his behavior years previous. So
Yeah.
there was the dance again, but each person had their own part to play in it. So how do you co-create the situation that you stay in? And I'm not talking about physical abuse, by the way. That's a completely different situation. You're a
Mm.
full victim in that situation, and it can be really difficult to leave because it's unsafe. But
Mhm.
anything outside of abuse, what's happening? How are you showing up? How do you
Mhm.
co-create what's going on? And
Mm.
that ownership of how you
Mhm.
do that can be really difficult and challenging. But actually, I fully, firmly believe that will set you free.
Mm.
If you can bypass the feeling of being hard done by, in the moment, which is hard to do when you feel hurt. But
Mhm.
if you can bypass that feeling and think, how am I contributing to this? How am I showing up and own it? It's a beautiful thing in any relationship.
Yeah, I agree. And so how does a person actually execute that? How do you do that in a relationship, would you say, Louise? Like in terms of, is it
Mm.
actually, for example, apologizing and explaining why you're sorry, for example, if there is something there that you have, need to take
Yeah,
responsibility for? How does one go about this, do you think?
yeah. That will be the surface level of what's going on. But it's never really about what you're talking about.
Mhm.
It's about what you're talking about evokes.
Yes.
What
Yeah.
does it evoke in you? It's not really the content.
It's
But
never the
what's this?
toothbrush like that has, or the toothpaste
No, no,
lid or
no,
whatever. No,
no,
no, of
no.
course not.
What's this
Yeah.
bringing up for you? What's this
Mm.
bringing out in you? What's this reminding you of? right? Because your nervous system reacts according to what it's being reminded of. It
Mm.
doesn't always mean there's threat in the current situation, but you could be reminded of something in the past that is quite like the situation that you're in, and it will react accordingly, and it will feel the same.
So are you suggesting then to share your vulnerability? For example, look, this is what happened. I felt very frightened there
Yeah,
because X, Y, or Z, so that you kind of explain and
yeah.
so a sense of being comfortable with your vulnerability and sharing it. Is that what you mean there?
It is. I would always say
Yeah.
in the heat of the moment, it's probably not going to land the way you need to. So take time out, take a breath. But if you're the
Yeah.
one to stop the conversation, if you're the one to, and this kind of goes back to argue better too, but if you're the one to press pause on a
Mhm.
situation that's getting a bit too heated, be the one to come back.
Mhm.
Be the one to come back, right? Because if you say, "Nah, I'm out. I need a break," and you go and you don't come back,
Mhm.
that's a little knife. If you're
Yes.
the one to step out, be the one to come back. Be the one
Yeah.
to make that bid for reconnection again. But the radical accountability takes place behind the scenes often as well. So it's a little
Mhm.
bit looking at what reflecting on, and even people listening and watching now can think about it. Even in a situation that you were in recently or in the past, or something that you struggle with a particular person in your life, it, by the way, it also doesn't mean that that person isn't being an ass, quite
Mhm.
frankly. It doesn't mean
Mhm.
that. They may be. And your boss may be the most cantankerous narcissist you've ever met in your life. Okay.
Mhm.
But you can still figure out how you're showing up.
Mhm.
You can still figure that out.
That's
So
where you're
it,
getting
it
your power back somehow.
100%. So it's not
Yeah.
it's not about it's about shifting your power, shifting your focus from how they have the power to how
Mhm.
you have the power. That's actually what
Yes.
it is. How you show, because you cannot control another person, you cannot change another person. But if you want to change another person, you've got to start with yourself
Mhm. Yes,
and
absolutely.
taking accountability for how you co-create. How do you show up? How do you shut down? How do you
Mhm.
emotionally withdraw? And how does that impact the other person? You
Yes,
know?
yeah. So I think it could also manifest in passive aggressiveness, for example, that maybe that's how
Yes.
you're showing up. Maybe it's really obvious the other
Yeah.
person is being, maybe they're more sort of conflict is obvious and they're shouting and it's very obvious to
That's right.
look and you're
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
you're the bad person
Hmm.
here. And I'm the victim. It's back to that,
Yeah.
victimhood and being able to say, well, hang on a moment, that little look, as you say, that your client gave, there's
Hmm.
an aggression in that, there's a
There sure is.
dismissiveness
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and to be able to own that and yeah, I think that's really important, and not just, again,
Mm,
I think it's so important that this applies to all of our relationships, especially even as a
mm.
parent. I think that we need to be able to say, for example, you know I didn't behave well there. That wasn't okay. That I just got really annoyed like that. I'm just really
Absolutely.
tired. I'm stressed.
Yeah.
There's been too much on me at the moment, and it's not
Yeah.
okay for me to take it out on you.
That's
That's
beautiful
radical
to do that with
accountability.
children. Yes, absolutely. That
For
is
example.
a lovely example, because
Okay.
the child or the teenager learns, okay, mom and dad is taking accountability here for themselves, and they're showing me that that behavior is not okay, actually. So,
Yeah.
if you keep telling them, well, you got to behave this way and that way and the other way,
Mm.
but then they're on the receiving end of that kind of behavior, that's dissonance. They're going to be confused by that. And they're going to think,
Yes.
well, why should I bother? But if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
actually own it, it takes so much more vulnerability and courage to step up and say, I messed up.
It
That's
does,
not
but
cool.
it leaves a very warm glow afterwards because you've been authentic and you've been true. So it's
Yes.
very good for self-esteem, really. It
Yes.
is.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
just laughing to myself here because I was talking to Luca earlier and I was saying to him, I'm always going on like, get off your phone, one screen, like don't be on
Yeah.
your phone. Don't be. And so he was trying to talk to me and I was like, yeah, 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 sweetheart. He goes, I am never going to listen to you again. You're a
Yeah.
complete hypocrite. I was like,
That's it.
yeah, you
Yeah.
got me there. I said, it's different. It's work.
Yeah. That's the good
Yes,
adult one. It's work.
I
Yeah.
know. It's a laugh. It's a laugh. But listen, I'd love to start the hypnotherapy now if that's okay. So this is a time for us all to really just bring this together. Okay. So I want to if you were to sum it up, let's get some words here into the chat as well, because I'd love to sort of let's if people want to just put in one word or one sort of point or insight that Louise has made here that really is resonating with you, or that you feel like that's what I want, that I want to be able to do that more, or that's something I really want to hold on to, just let us know in the chat. So let's get the language in terms of what would be helpful, and then I can put that into the hypnotherapy. Ownership, like it,
Mm.
Jackie. That's
Mhm.
a great word, and it kind of goes across all the principles, doesn't it?
Mm.
Own it. Geraldine, the dance, lovely, thank you. Carol, self-awareness, great.
Yeah.
What about yourself, Louise? Anything coming to you that you think that would encapsulate what we've been speaking about, or any particular words?
I think, and I love that those were the first ones, was the owning it, because I honestly,
Yeah.
even personally speaking, owning how I showed up changed my relationships.
Hmm.
My own history of relationships were quite volatile. I'll be quite honest.
Hmm.
From when
Hmm.
I started dating up until my early 30s.
Hmm.
Not that long ago. So
Yes, yeah. I was like, you can't be much more
yeah,
than that. You're like
okay.
25 or something.
Okay, we'll go with
We'll go
that.
with that.
But
Yeah.
it was like, they were volatile because I wasn't owning how I was showing up, because I was staying in victim consciousness, because I mistrusted people, because
Hmm.
I was in emotionally abusive relationships,
Hmm.
right? So there's a spiral, and it
Hmm.
connects, and it leaves a mark. But until we own how that has left a mark, we will keep bringing it in to the next and the next and the next, and it will always be somebody else's fault until we figure out how we show up. And
Yeah.
it's transformational, and it is hard work. I won't
Yeah.
lie, it's difficult work. It hurts, it
Mm.
really does, but it is so worthwhile. It
Mm.
can change all of your relationships across the board, because you're
Mm.
no longer looking at yourself through other people's eyes. You're no
Mhm.
longer investing yourself in other people just to get approval, because you've given it to yourself. And
Yeah.
so when you show up with somebody else, you show up alongside them, rather than
Mm.
hoping they're going to reach in and fill those voids in you. And it doesn't work that way. That's codependency.
Yes, yeah, that's lovely. Thank you so much, Louise. And that, yeah, I think that really sums it up. And you can see what I hope people will take away from this is that sense of how it is possible. Do you know what I mean? In terms of, yes,
Mhm.
it's hard, but
Mm.
like it's actually, often think it's harder to stay in that place. It's harder to remain in that,
Yeah,
place of not taking accountability, of repeating the patterns.
it's
That's hard.
painful as well.
That's
Yeah,
exhausting. It's like
it
that
is.
couple who come in all these years of unnecessary conflict and tension. So
Yeah.
yeah, and just to know that that's possible, I always think is really worth highlighting.
Mm.
Not to say it's easy, but the rewards are just endless,
Oh,
and
they're
not
endless.
just,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, they're
They
endless.
are. Well, you start to see your relationships the way they actually are. And then you start to see all the beauty that's in them. And you start to see all the autonomy and strength and incredibleness
Mm,
in the other person, the way
yes.
they are, the reality of the way they are, rather than what you think they should be, or what you've fantasized about what it should be like from a very young age, right? So you just see it for what it is, and then you can appreciate it that way. And that's the relationship that thrives.
Yeah, that's it. Gorgeous. Okay, so loads of lovely words coming in there. We each bring our own ideas, ownership again. Um, brilliant, great conversation, authentic and honest. Okay, so let's just stay with me now for a few minutes, and then what we'll do is we'll remain on for some questions and answers afterwards for about an extra 5 or 10 minutes max. But
Mhm.
for now, let's just close down the eyes, and I invite you to get as comfortable as you can. So wherever you are, maybe you're in your bedroom, on your sofa, wherever you are, really take this time, because it's incredibly important to bring everything together. We're going to go on a lovely journey. And I want you to imagine that you can see in front of you a path, and that this path is one that just gently spirals down, so that when you walk down the path, you're going to notice yourself just gently letting go and feeling more relaxed. And I want you to imagine that you're trusting this path to guide you. So, a sense of allowing yourself to release and surrender to the journey ahead. I ask you to trust the deepest parts of yourself to bring you on this journey. The part of you that is pure, the part of you that has a desire to feel safe, and the part of you that deserves to feel loved and to give love. So, this is an authentic self. And we're going to imagine that we'll take 7 steps, and each step will be accompanied by a beautiful breath. And that breath will allow the relaxation to deepen. And as the relaxation deepens, your ability to become vulnerable, to be open, and to have the courage it takes to connect, first and foremost to yourself, and then after to everybody fortunate enough to be in your life. So let's just take that first step and breath together as we breathe in for 7. Make it deep into the belly and then just a beautiful release and step forward. And as you're stepping forward, I want you to imagine you're owning this. So there's a sense of you really being sort of taking your place with pride. And you're consciously choosing to walk forward. Walking forward into perhaps uncertainty, but with your head up high. Let's take the next step together. And each step, as I said, just allows you to rest and relax a little bit more. So for 6, breathing in and that lovely exhale as you step forward. And just notice that there's an ability to trust this journey, that as you're walking, you are releasing. And it's like you're releasing and letting go, perhaps, of things that no longer serve you. Maybe it's possible that you're becoming more aware, more alert to looking for the good, looking for the appreciation of the people in your life and trusting them that they are doing their best, just as you are. Let's take the next step, and each step, the suggestions can gently float into your consciousness. You don't have to do anything at all, but just enjoy the relaxation. So for 5, deep breath. And this pathway starts to open out into a beautiful path that is surrounded by perhaps nature and flowers and life. And it's clear to you that as you walk, you are with this incredible person, this beautiful person that is your authentic self. That you have everything you need within you, that you are able to trust yourself, to show up, to take accountability for your own actions, even when they are not perhaps so pure, or when your behavior is perhaps irritable, to be at peace with that. So let's go that little bit deeper for 4. And notice that the steps become easier. The further you go on this journey, the more you are able to really notice all of the joy that is within you and in your relationships. As we take the next step for 3, I want you to really find a moment in time right now that you felt very connected to a person you love. And I want you to imagine that glow in your heart. So this could be your partner, perhaps a friend, a child, a sibling, a parent, a pet. It doesn't matter, but just see if you can find that feeling of really feeling safe and connected to another being. To know that this person is open and accepting of you as you are. We take another deep breath for 2. And that feeling can just really fill into your heart space. And it's the acceptance that this person offers you, not how you should be, without expectations upon you, but the ability to see the goodness in you even when you can't see it yourself. What a gift that is. And as you breathe in for 1, can you extend that gift now to others? Can you give the same sense of pure, unconditional acceptance of that person as they are, rather than how you may have thought in the past they should be? Can you bring your pure, authentic self, your present self, not the past or the future, but just you now, as one human being connecting to another without expectations, but just a pure, beautiful openness? So just allow all of that as you imagine yourself at the bottom of this lovely path and really taking in all of the different insights that we've shared here this evening. And know that this goes far beyond yourself. This goes into even future generations. That by being here this evening, you're actually helping shape the relationships of generations to come through this awareness, through this work, by turning up, by showing up. Can you give yourself gratitude and appreciation and then share it again outwards? So I'll count up to 3 in a moment. Keep that warmness in your heart. Allow yourself perhaps a gentle smile. Imagine your heart even smiling, acknowledging that as we breathe in for 1. And just allow the relaxation to stay so you can enjoy a good night's sleep. Releasing for 2. Keep that sense of relaxation, resting. And our final deep breath for 3. And we will just very softly open our eyes up. And there we are. So, thank you everybody for staying with us and going on that lovely little journey. So, we'll take a few minutes just to go, maybe about 5 minutes, and let's have a look at some of these questions, Louise.
Mhm.
So, the ones that are most upvoted, I'll just go with the first one there, is creating a self-compassion and care boundary with narcissist rather than avoidance. Sorry, I don't really. Do you understand that? To create a
I see it.
self-compassion and care boundary. Can you see it there at the bottom if you
You
just,
know, yeah.
yeah.
Creating self-compassion and care boundary with narcissists rather than
Oh,
avoidance.
okay. Yes. Is it better
Okay.
to create a
Mhm.
self-compassion and care? What would you say to that with a narcissist? My God, so
There's
there's a lot
different
in that
levels of
question.
narcissism. Yeah, and this is where I'd love to be able to talk to people directly, but because I'd ask more questions. But I'm guessing it's a family member, perhaps, rather than a partner. I could be wrong. But okay, so the need or the desire to create a self-compassionate care boundary rather than avoidance. Okay. I would ask this person just how damaging it is. What kind of a debilitating impact is this person having in their own lives at the moment or for the chronic long term?
So,
Um,
Anne, if you were there, you can actually answer in the chat function. You can
yeah,
use the chat if you want to just
if
say
you feel
anything,
comfortable,
if you feel comfortable.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you don't have to. You can reflect as well just on this. But first and foremost, what's the impact on your life? What's the impact on your sense of self? What's the impact on your self-concept, on your own worth in the airspace of this narcissist in your life. And I'm wondering the impetus to create a care boundary, and a compassionate one at that, versus an actual block. I'm wondering what the impetus is, or what the motivation is. So is it the desire to keep this person in the life? Is it the desire to, because it's too difficult actually maybe to extract yourself from them? Maybe they are very integrated into your life, which is completely understandable. So
Mm.
self-compassion and a care boundary, depending on what's going on and who this person is, there are many techniques that you can use around a narcissist, right? They get fueled by your energy, they get fueled by your attention, by your empathy. If you remove that, they'll likely get annoyed, they'll likely devalue you, they'll likely become quite dismissive of you. So one beautiful way I actually sort of heard and worked with somebody on, in terms of their own mother, who was quite narcissistic, and very dismissive and very critical, was that helping that person to reframe what the mother was actually saying in in broad terms, such as, okay, I hear you giving me advice, criticism. I hear you giving me advice because I know that you care about me and I know that you want the best for me. And she would give her a kiss on the cheek and she would say, thank you, mum. Thank
Mm.
you for caring. Right.
Mm.
And that's very difficult to do when you feel hurt and you feel like your own boundaries have been crossed and you
Mm.
feel quite scooped out from within, quite honestly, because that's how you feel in the airspace of someone who's narcissistic. It's
Mm.
very difficult to walk that line and then say, thank you. I know you care about me,
Mhm.
but I'm doing pretty well. But thank you. Right. And I mean it. I
Mhm.
mean
Mhm.
it. But there's a bit of a journey to create, to begin to reframe what you're seeing from this other person, from particularly a parent,
Mhm.
and be able to reconceptualize it and reframe it in those terms so that you can put the boundary down and walk away from that.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
that's one way. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's lovely. Thank you, Louise. We'll move on. So how to overcome habits formed as a child where we suppressed our emotions to keep the peace. This was the way our mum controlled our family.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we
Mm-hmm.
overcome habits formed as a child where we suppressed our emotions? So that's really
Mm.
quite common, isn't it, Louise?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were raised for loyalty and you were raised for relationships. You weren't raised for autonomy and you weren't raised to discover who you really are, what your needs are, what your goals are, what your values are, what matters to you. You weren't raised for that. You were raised for loyalty. And often, depending on the situation, but if you're raised for loyalty, it means you overlook things that don't feel right to the gut. It means you overlook things that are actually unacceptable in as an adult. You overlook them because loyalty and attachment and relationship became more important. So you maintain the relationship against the odds. You retain the relationship no matter what else is going on. You don't abandon the relationship and you don't abandon the family. So
Mm.
you grow up with those values. But they're not yours. So here's the difficulty. It's
Mhm.
actually, this is and this is one of the toughest times in my own life, was learning to look inside and think, what do I stand for? If it's not, if I'm not embroiled or caught up in the narratives of a family situation, what am I?
Mm.
Who am I? If I'm not helping or supporting somebody else,
Mm.
I know the irony is I'm a psychologist, right? But if I'm not helping or supporting somebody else, what am I? What's behind that? Is there anything behind that? And actually, when you start looking in to who you are, if you're not the one that keeps the emotions down to keep the peace, when you start looking at, well, who am I, you might not see very much, and that can be terrifying. It doesn't mean
Mm.
it's not there. It just
Mhm.
means you've got a journey to go on to figure out what it is and who you are. So
Mm.
how to overcome those habits formed as a child?
Mm.
Start connecting to your truth, right? So we all have a gut response. Sometimes it's difficult to tell the difference between a trauma response, right, and a gut
Mm.
response.
Mhm.
And just to give some clarity on that, the trauma response will have intense emotions, panic, usually accompanied by some form of anxiety.
Mm.
A gut response is usually very calm. It's usually just a
Mm.
knowing.
Mhm.
And that's how
Mhm.
you can tell the difference between these things. So when you are in a Donna, when you're in a situation where you feel that old feeling of, I can't say what I have to say, even though this is not, I want you to stop and reflect that that's actually what's happening in this very moment. You might not notice it until after the event, because when we start doing things in a different way, it can take us some time to actually adapt and adjust and learn new ways of doing things.
Mm.
So after the next time you notice that this happens, reflect on it. Take some time to yourself and think, oh yeah, it
Mm.
happened again. Give it a title. When this happens, give it a title, like a movie title. Even sometimes make it a funny title, because, oh, there's that
Mhm.
story again. There's the
Mhm.
emotion expression story again. Okay, there, I pushed it down again. What
Mm.
would I do differently? Right? And here's the most important question. What can I do differently? And the reason that we don't do it, right, is, and you said it in your own question, this is how she kept control.
Mhm.
This is how she
Mhm.
kept control.
Mm.
So the risk is, right, doing something different,
Mm.
explosive, anger, right? So this is what you're avoiding.
Mm.
So there's a bit of a conversation to be had, and with support, hopefully, of people that you're close to, that when you speak your truth, be prepared for the chaos. It doesn't mean it will break, but be prepared for the chaos in
Mm.
pursuit of being authentic to you.
Yeah, that's lovely and really well put, Louise. And when you say it's also helpful maybe to acknowledge the times where you do, like, that moment where you feel you want to say something and you don't,
Yeah.
but then there's a
Mhm.
moment when you do, and just really to kind of be so proud of yourself for
Yeah.
the time that you didn't suppress and you actually expressed yourself in
Yeah.
whatever way it was. Maybe you just stopped
Even
and
if it's
started.
chaos.
Even if
Mhm.
it's chaos, it's
Mhm.
like well
Mhm.
done because it's
It doesn't
progress
make
and
it
it's
wrong. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, exactly. Listen, we're going to have to leave it there. There's lots more questions, but unfortunately, it's now nearly 9 o'clock, so I do want to wrap up. But Louise, I just want to say thank you. Honestly, I feel just so privileged to have you here this evening. You've
Oh,
no idea. It means so
thank
much,
you.
and
That's
I know
lovely.
that you've helped a lot of people because anytime I listen to you, like if it's on the radio or any podcast, anything, I'm just glued because you
Thank
have such an amazing way of expressing yourself and it really, really resonates with people. And I know that that's why I was so delighted when you agreed to come. So thank you so
you.
much. And
Thank you. Those are lovely words. I really appreciate that, Fiona. Thanks for having me.
I'm delighted. Thank you. And thank you everybody for being here. I see some lovely familiar names, which is just gorgeous. And it's my duty, my honor, I just love to be able to provide this for you all. And thank you for coming. And yes, that's really it. You can check out Prison Therapy and also Louise's new Trigger Me, which is really like again, we didn't get into it, but it's the
Yeah.
whole idea of being
Mhm.
triggered, isn't it, by the
Mhm.
person you
Mhm.
find
It's about
um,
narcissism, the whole song, actually. Yeah.
right, okay.
Yeah.
So there you go. You need to listen to that.
Yeah.
And yes, so lots of love to everybody. Thank you, Louise. Get a good night's sleep, everyone.
Thank
Take on
you.
board. You can even watch it back. Somebody said there earlier in the comments that they're going to
Mm.
go back over it. I think it's really useful to do that and take notes of things that resonate with you because the more you do
Yeah.
that, that's you doing the work. That's you
Yeah.
showing up, isn't it?
That's
Yeah.
it. It's bringing it into your conscious awareness. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So good night, everybody, and
Thank
lots
you,
of
everyone.
love. Thank you,
Mullingar.
Louise. You're a superstar.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take it
Thank you
easy.
so much, guys.
My
Thanks,
pleasure.
everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. How do I? Oh, yes. End bread course. Don't know how to do it. There we go. Bye, everyone.